What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to the returning viewers, and if you're brand new here, welcome to Hobby Harvest. My name is Ken. So every deer in the woods, from fawn to mature buck, follows these 4 rules. And often you'll hear a lot of guys talking about how their deer herd went nocturnal, their target buck went nocturnal. That's just because they're no longer following these 4 rules. And once you understand these, you'll have absolutely no trouble figuring out where the deer are and why they're there at any given time of the year. So number 1 on the list, we're just going to get it out of the way, is the rut. The rut is what I call consistently inconsistent deer movement. So you may have had deer coming up on your camera, super consistent throughout the season. All of a sudden the rut hits. Now where are they? Well, nobody knows. They are so random in their movement during the rut. I'll share with you guys a story of just my season so far. I would go and sit. I have a nice PM stand on a food plot here close to home, so I can just hop out of work, get over there, sit for a couple hours before dark, before daylight savings time. Of course, now it gets dark way too early. I swear it was light out at this time yesterday. But I would go sit. I would have about a half dozen does and fawns come in every single day at the exact same minute, at the exact same trail into the food plot every single day. You could set your watch by them right up until the rut. So I was actually sitting one day. I had a little 8-pointer come in. He came into the mock scrape about 20 yards right in front of me. I was going to let him walk because he's just, for how young he is, he looks really good. I want to see what he looks like in another year or two. So, but I'm watching him, and the does are coming in from where they normally come in, and there's a switchgrass band there that's about 5 to 10 feet wide. They can't see each other. I can see over the top of it and see them. He goes over, catches a glimpse of them, goes and chases them all over the place. I had deer popping out of the woods all over the place. I couldn't even count how many deer I had in front of me and around me because they were just getting chased everywhere. That was the last time I had consistent does coming into that food plot every single night. That was about the pre-rut. That was when those young bucks started chasing. The old guys hadn't really got up and moving yet because those young guys just get a little antsy and get going a little sooner than the big dogs do. But that was the last time I had consistent doe movement. Well, that would look on a trail camera like my deer went nocturnal. Where did they go? Well, that's what happened, is they're getting pushed all over the county by these bucks. These bucks are all over the county. It's hard to say that you're going to have that consistent buck movement when that mature buck is standing in someone's front yard in a subdivision in the middle of the day during the rut. Like, they're just all over places that they normally never go to. There is no way to really have consistent deer movement other than it's consistently inconsistent. There's just so much of it that you are likely to see deer during the rut. But the chances of getting like that target buck in front of you during the rut is just like insanely low chances, because who knows where he is. You could find another one that looks just like him that came from 5 miles away another way, just happened to wander into your area while your guy went 5 miles that way. But whatever, we're going to get the rut out of the way, and then we're going to get into the 3 things you can actually control. So number 2 on the list is food. Deer eat 5 times a day. 2 to 3 of those are during daylight hours. Now I say 2 to 3 because given the time of year, we have more hours of light during the day than we do in the winter, and the further north and south you are, that changes throughout the year as well. So when you have less hours of daylight, they're going to feed twice during the day. When you have more hours of daylight, it's going to be 3 times a day. Now, that being said, the majority of a deer's movement, if you put a pedometer on them and tracked how many steps they take, about 90% of those steps are going to be taken after daylight, so in the dark. So we really need to be focused on that 10% of movement during those 2 to 3 feedings during daylight hours if we want to actually target them as hunters. Now, the thing with food sources, though, is that they change throughout the year. The deer go through a winter where they're browsing on woody browse and soft shrubs like red osier dogwoods and just pretty much anything that they can literally eat just to get them through the winter. I've seen them eat bark off of trees just because they needed something in their bellies to burn to get them through the winter. If you guys have ever had your trail cams out like all year or into the spring and have seen how skinny those deer are, especially in the northern states, when they come out of a winter compared to what they look like this time of year after they've had all summer and fall to bulk up, it is insane how much body weight they lose over the winter. So the deer always going to be focused on the number one food source, whatever that is in your area, but that changes throughout the year. So when the farmers plant their ag fields, they might be focused on those, but then those get harvested, and then where do they go? Somebody might have a food plot, so they focus on the food plot, but the food plot has a peak and a valley as well, because it is desirable at different stages of the year as well, depending on what got planted in it. We're coming up here in Wisconsin on the gun deer season. A bunch of guys in orange are going to go dump a bunch of corn in the woods. It's going to change the feeding habits of the deer herds. So when your deer change what their daily movement is, it may be because they're switching to a more desirable food source. Now, it could be something, I like to use fruit trees for an example. So when those fruit trees grow their fruit and they drop their fruit so the deer can get it, they're going to hit up those fruit trees if they're in a secluded enough area. I mean, my dad has fruit trees in his front yard and they eat those in the middle of the night because they obviously don't want to be out there in the daylight hours, but they will feed on those fruit trees. But once that fruit's gone, it's gone. Now they're going to relate to a different food source. Acorns work the same way. Those acorns drop, they get eaten up, and now the deer don't move to that area anymore because that food source is gone. So they will change where they're moving to based on what food source is the most desirable at the time. So this is why when we're trying to create this on private property, we want that awesome food plot that is just the number one food source, no matter what time of the hunting season it is, because we at least take this one out of the equation and know that, hey, we have the best food source. It's got to be one of these other three things. And so number two we're going to get into is cover. So cover and bedding are going to be another thing that determines where the deer are moving, what their daily movement is. These deer want an unpressured bedding area that's safe, secure, thick bedding area where they can go and lay down and not be bothered by anything during the daylight hours. So when I said that they feed 2 to 3 times during the day, one of those times is going to be in that bedding area. That's why that bedding area needs to have browse in it. And then that other feeding right before it gets dark out, or right at dark after dark, is typically going to be that like food plot, that leafy green area, which is why for PM sits we always try to set up between a bedding area and their food source. And if we can ambush them while they move from point A to point B, awesome PM sit there for you. So what we know though is that these bedding areas can also change throughout the year. In the spring, they may be completely open, not a leaf on any stem, but all of a sudden the leaves start filling in and the deer can shift to wherever they were bedding. Maybe it was more like marsh grasses, etc., that stayed up in the winter, but now they can go over to this other area that now has all these nice little green buds for them to feed on in their bedding areas, but also is leafing out to give them cover, that they're not in the open anymore. I mean, I have some areas in my woods up in northwestern Wisconsin that, like, during the summer you can't see 20 yards out of them, but in the winter you can see 100 yards right through them. It's just the type of foliage that's growing in that area, that there's just so many leaves on the branches that it makes it so you can't see through. But then in the winter, all the leaves are gone and the branches aren't thick enough that you can see through. So the deer don't want something like that when the leaves are off, but when the leaves are on, they're okay with it. So these bedding areas can also change throughout the season depending on how desirable they are for being cover and being browse for the deer in those locations. So you always want to keep in mind that when you're all of a sudden not seeing deer that you were, it could be because their food source changed or their bedding area changed just due to the change in the season. But it could also be from any other reasons, like somebody else provided a better bedding area or a better food source, or just like I said, where as the leaves fall off, a different area has thicker stems that aren't reliant on leaves. So now they moved over to that bedding area and it moves their entire daily movement around. Now, fourth and final is, of course, pressure. So most of the season, we go with very little pressure in the woods. There's not a lot of people out and about in the woods, but as soon as the hunting season start, all of a sudden you have all of the bird hunters are out there. You got the bow hunters out there. You've got people out there just hiking, wanting to look at the fall colors. And all of a sudden there's human pressure in the woods in areas that it's never been before all summer long. So the deer will move away from their favorite food source and their favorite bedding source if it gets overpressured, and they'll move to their second favorite and start relating to those as well. So this is one of the things that's easy for us to control. So on private land, we can create the best bedding area, the best food source, but then we also have to make sure we don't mess it up by putting too much pressure on it, or we're going to completely screw it up. And that's actually one of the hardest things to do on private land. You create such a perfect area for deer that there's so many deer on the property so close to you that it is so hard to actually get in and hunt them without just busting them all off of your property. Where a lot of other guys are just relying on deer coming from so far away, it's nearly impossible to bust them out on your walk in or out of the stand. So just something to think of make sure you're getting in and out undetected, because if you bust them, they're going to go find the next food source. They're going to go find the next bedding area. And that's just another thing you got to take out of the equation. So if you're giving the best food, giving the best bedding, or finding it on public land, and then you're not going in and making a lot of noise, blowing your scent all over the place, these are the 3 things we can control, and those deer will stay consistent for you throughout the season, except during the rut. If you guys want to check out the trail cams I use for B-roll here on the channel, I'll leave them down in the description. Otherwise, if you feel like you got some value out of this, go ahead, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one. Otherwise, go check out this one. I'll catch you guys on the next one.